Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
Have 25 years of marriage been in vain? Today's story has a similar intriguing plot. Enjoy watching. What I told my wife, hindsight showed me that I should have noticed something was going on weeks ago. For over 7 weeks, my wife Brianna has been especially attentive to me. She started making me a really good breakfast instead of the usual toast and coffee. She prepared my favorite dinners, even with wine. After dinner, she changed into new lingerie and became very affectionate before taking me to bed in the early hours. Had I thought about these changes in our 24-year marriage? Never. I have happily accepted these changes as part of our new normal since our last child left for college just a few months ago. I wanted to do more for Bri too. I tried to be home every evening no later than 5 p.m. I started taking her to nice restaurants. We went to little theater shows in the area for the first time in months. We went dancing. I gave her flowers. I was ready to enjoy the benefits of empty nest life. My name is Tyler Winslow, my nickname is Ty. My wife Brianna, or Bri, and I had been together for almost a quarter of a century, or so I thought. Like any marriage, we had our ups and downs, but the highs far outweighed them. I was happy with life. I work for a large publishing house. Over the years, I have become proficient in all aspects of publishing, editing and reviewing submissions, meeting with authors, negotiating terms, collaborating with designers, developing schedules, budgeting marketing expenses, and handling film rights. I am very proud to present a new book and a new author to the public. Thus, after 20 years of broad experience, I became a senior director of the company. My wife Bri is an incredibly beautiful woman, almost 45 years old. We are both doing well thanks to good genes, an active lifestyle, and good nutrition. People often say that we are a beautiful couple. Since she returned to work after our youngest son started kindergarten, Bri has been working as a paralegal for the large law firm of Thomas Dixon and Harris. She became the manager of the paralegals and distributes the work that comes into her office among the subordinate paralegals. My life changed dramatically on Wednesday of last week. I arrived home as usual around 5 p.m. Bri was busy in the kitchen with dinner. Over the past few weeks, she has been cooking dinner that is higher and better than what we had before the kids were grown. I kissed the back of her head as I entered the kitchen. Usually, Bri would turn around at this point and give me a full kiss, but this time she didn't. "I don't deserve the mind-blowing kiss I've been getting for the last 2 months," I exclaimed. "What's happening?" "Nothing," she replied, "but I'm glad my husband is home," she said. Instead, she never looked away from her work on the countertop. It seemed a little cold, as if she didn't want to look at me even for the few seconds it would take to turn around and kiss me. "Is there something wrong?" I asked. "You seem busy." "No, nothing, absolutely nothing," she replied. "Change, and when you come down, you'll have a glass of your favorite wine." Now it seemed she was trying to hurry me out of the kitchen rather than share a few moments of tenderness. I shrugged off the feeling that something was wrong and went upstairs to the bedroom. After hanging up my suit and tossing the shirt in the laundry basket, I changed into comfortable Dockers and a collarless sweatshirt. The dinner wasn't luxurious, but it looked like Bri had gone out of her way to make it especially enjoyable. She had been doing this for months. Dinner consisted of a salad of chopped lettuce and tomato followed by the main course, roast pork on a bed of riced cauliflower. As we clinked glasses of wine, Bri said, "You know I love you, don't you?" It sounded different than the usual "I love you," followed by my obligatory response, "And I love you too." After dinner, we cleared the table. Bri put away the unused food, and my job was to collect the dishes and put them in the dishwasher. While I was doing this, Bri said she was going to go upstairs to change into something more comfortable. I could hardly wait to see what it would be. When I walked into the kitchen and then into the living room, the lights were dimmed, and Bri was stretched seductively on the couch. Her negligee barely covered her vital parts, while the plunging neckline showed off her supple breasts. I didn't waste any time and knelt down by the sofa to kiss her. It was an exotic kiss. From there, I kissed her bare shoulders and pulled off what little clothing she had from her chest to her navel. She had beautiful breasts. This was her best feature. "You love me, don't you, Ty? You'll always love me, won't you?" No matter what. Of course I will, I replied. I stood up and undressed as quickly as possible, then lay down on the sofa next to her. I wasn't going to waste time carrying her upstairs. The time for foreplay was over. I couldn't wait to make love to her, and she couldn't wait any longer either. Half an hour later, we snuggled together on the sofa. I noticed that she was especially passionate that evening, and in fact, her love was delightful. For several weeks, I'm glad we got back some of the passion we'd lost over the years, I said, kissing her neck and throat lightly. Our conversation moved from how good she looked despite approaching 45 to how toned her body was for her age. You could easily be mistaken for 30 or 35, I said. Bree complimented me by running her hand over my abs and said she was also glad I took such good care of my body. I was half awake when Bree said, "Honey, I need to talk to you about something." "About anything," I answered lazily. "First of all," she began, "you know how much I love you, don't you?" "Yes, and I love you just as much," I replied. "Darling," she said it so quietly that I could barely hear her. "This Friday, I made an appointment for the night with a man from my office." Her announcement took a few seconds to sink in. When this happened, I stood up and looked straight into her eyes, saying, "What are you doing?" She tried to lower my head back to her chest where I had been resting, but I resisted. "What are you doing?" I repeated. "It won't affect our feelings for each other. I will still love you, and you will still love me." "Are you kidding? Is this some kind of joke?" I asked her. "No, Ty, it's not a joke. I have a date on Saturday with a man, a lawyer from my office. We're going to have dinner and dancing, and then go to his hotel room. I'll stay with him for the night. I'll go back home somewhere late Sunday morning. In other words, you're going to spend all Saturday night and Sunday morning having with some, right? Please don't use those terms, they're so rude. He's a very nice person. I really like him." I was now fully awake and listening carefully to what was being said. I started getting dressed to show that our intimate time together was over. It was obvious to Bree that I was not happy. "Please, Ty, don't be like that. I still only love you, and you still love me. It will only be one time, and then it will all be over. In a week, we will be the same as we are now, and you will forget about everything." "I don't think so, Bree," I snorted. "Who is this Prince Charming?" "Bree, why now that we're doing so well do you want to completely ruin our marriage?" Bree, who was now putting on her satin robe, said, "I don't want to tell you his name because it's not important for you to know, and I don't want you to try to get back at him. Plus, he's bigger than you and most likely could hurt you in a fight." Now with my rage at my side and a baseball bat in my hands, I countered. And Bree continued, "It'll only be this one time because he's leaving Sunday night for his day job in New York and won't be coming back. He better leave town," I told her. "Otherwise, the next time he walks into court, he'll be on crutches." Beyond my initial reaction to Bree's announcement, which was rage, I began to feel a sense of loss. Bree and I have been together for over 20 years. She's been my only lover since we took each other's virginities in our final year of school. I have been tempted but never touched another woman. "So, how long has this case been going on?" I asked. "It's not a fling, we barely touched each other." "What do you mean, barely touched?" I wanted to know. "Does it mean holding hands, hugging, kissing? Does this include stroking?" Bree didn't answer my questions, which led me to believe it had reached the stroking stage. Otherwise, she would have admitted to less intimate types of caresses. He was referred to us about 6 months ago from a prestigious law firm in New York to work on a particularly complex tax case. Due to its complexity, I and several other paralegals did a lot of research. In addition, I worked closely with him in developing charts and graphs that we are going to use in court. Over time, we became very close. 2 months ago, he told me that he had strong feelings for me and wanted to sleep with me. I wasn't about to sneak off to some cheap motel for stay late at work to do it on a desk somewhere in the office. Our relationship was special and too valuable for this type of cheap connection. We wanted a special night that would be just for us. He asked me if I could come up with an excuse to get away for the weekend, or at least for one night. I told him I doubted I could come up with an excuse that would cover such a long period of time. Besides, I said, I really don't want to lie to my husband. He asked me if my husband would be willing or could be persuaded to allow us to be together for a day, a night, or a weekend. I told him that I know how deeply you love me, but I didn't know if you would divorce me because of a one-time date. I didn't think so, especially if you knew that it was just a one-time episode and would never happen again. But I couldn't be sure. Why would you want to do this to us, Bree? We have everything you could want in a marriage. We love each other, we have great kids, no money problems, and our health is good. Why did my friend convince me that I was missing something? You are the only man I have ever been with. I feel like I need to experience more. He showed me that there is more with him. This will do, I said. I'm a complete woman. Besides, he cares about me, and I also have feelings for him. This is not a dirty romance. But Bree, I exclaimed, we have such a wonderful union. You're the only woman I've ever been with, and I'm the only man you've ever been with. You don't understand, Ty. I need this. I want this. I want him, she replied. Why do you need this? I asked. He is an incredibly handsome man who is much younger than me, but nevertheless finds me irresistible. I am drawn to him like a moth to a flame. I just need to have him at least once, otherwise, I will never be satisfied again, she said. He feels the same. Please, darling, let me do this, then I'll be yours forever, she pleaded. I will never agree to this, I objected. It will destroy us and our marriage. No, it won't, darling. Let me do this, and I'll be the most wonderful wife you can imagine. I'll cook for you, take care of the house, do the laundry, do the grocery shopping, and everything else. I'll be the best partner you could only dream of. You can do whatever you want with me anytime. I will treat you like a king for the rest of your life, and I will never touch another man again. I promise, except I'll have a wife who slept with another man and cuckolded me, I replied. For a man, this is the ultimate expression of disrespect. You're going to have to deal with this. I'm going to do this, Ty. I need to get over this with my friend. It won't change anything between us. I'll still love you, and you'll still love me, she said. So that's why you've been so attentive and affectionate to me for the last 2 months. It had nothing to do with us becoming empty nesters. You thought that if you courted me, I'd be less inclined to lose you over a one-time date and more likely to agree to your date. That's not going to happen, I said. Bree remained adamant in the face of all my arguments and protests. Her decision was made, and she had no intention of changing it. I didn't mean to beg, she would have to face the consequences, whatever they might be. I didn't know yet. I went up to the master bedroom, gathered a few things for the next day and some toiletries, and moved into the guest room, which in our large house had its own bathroom. Bree intercepted me as I was moving my things. Please, don't be like that, Ty. Nothing will change. I know you're a little angry right now, but it will all be over by Sunday afternoon, and we can be ourselves again, she said. I'm not just a little angry. If you do that, I said very calmly but firmly, we'll never be able to be ourselves again. I closed the guest bedroom door on her without saying a word. I was left alone with my thoughts. I considered all the standard obvious alternatives, divorce, moving, evicting Bree, which was my favorite, physically preventing her from dating, calling her parents, calling our kids, and more. But I couldn't divorce her. Despite her temporary mental confusion, I still loved her to pieces. I rejected my other obvious options. I had no intention of leaving my own home. Besides, no matter what happens, Bree will try to improve. So physically, I will have a maid and slave for the rest of my life. I wasn't going to call my family and spill the beans because I wanted to keep this argument just between us. She might decide to call off her affair if her family dissuaded her, but that would mean it would be due to outside influences. Plus, it might make her want to hide a future date. If she decided against with Prince Charming, she would have to make that decision herself based on the merits of our marriage. It was Thursday evening. No doubt Bree waited until almost the last moment to announce her date. This limited the time she had to spend dealing with an angry husband and limited the time I had to convince her that her date was a bad idea. Lack of time also limited my ability to prevent her from dating. My mind didn't work like a machine. I was scared that I was losing my wife. She said she has feelings for this guy. Perhaps now that the children have left home, she might consider leaving me for him. It would completely break my heart. After she sleeps with him, she might prefer it to or she might be interested in kinky with other men in the future. And I had been having for 25 years, and there weren't many surprises in bed anymore. However, I found our intimacy comfortable and enjoyable. Even after 25 years, her body still turned me on. I was excited by the thought of her in a negligee or a tight figure-hugging black dress or just a towel. Then I thought, maybe I could interfere with her plans. Perhaps somehow I could prevent her date from happening at all. Prince Charming will be gone before a backup date can be arranged, and I'll have time with my wife to make it clear to her that she's taking a risk and to extract some harmless retribution to prevent her from ever thinking about something like that again. Before I fell asleep late Thursday night, I came up with a plan. It seems like I couldn't talk Bree out of hooking up with Prince Charming, but maybe her employer could. I knew that Thomas Dixon and Harris had a policy against fraternization of employees. If Bree's relationship is mentioned to one of their partners, perhaps they will talk to Bree and discuss how her work might be affected by being involved with an associate partner. I was the first one up the next morning. Although I usually made coffee for Bree before I left for work, I didn't do that this time. She said good morning, but I didn't return her greeting. "Don't do this," was all I said, and soon after, I left the house without the usual goodbye kiss. I'm sure she noticed the coldness of my actions. My plan, if you can call it that, was to talk to the managing partner, William Thomas. I had met him several times over the years at various social events at his law firm. He seemed like a nice guy, communicated easily, and was relaxed. Despite the personal nature of the question, I wanted to let him know what was going on between me and Bree and the unknown New Yorker in his office. Perhaps he could talk to her about the consequences of her date. The next night, I was not a lawyer, but I thought that Thomas Dixon and Harris would not want to open their firm to a possible harassment claim from my wife if she became angry with the company for any reason. Mid-morning on Friday, I drove downtown to the Thomas Dixon and Harris office building. I took the elevator to the top floor where the three partners had their offices and large meeting rooms for their most important clients. The outside office was a large open space with one desk in the middle. To the right was a sitting area or waiting room with plush soft chairs, a sofa, and a coffee table. To the left was a fully equipped bar built into the closets. Modern, tasteful, and expensive paintings adorn the walls. I've been in this area a few times for small social events with Bree. Protecting the gate to the partner offices was Emily Lioness Stratton. I knew Emily too through several parties in the area and other social events over the years. We were friends. Emily was probably the nicest person at the law firm. She always had a smile on her face and a happy mood. Emily was about 55 years old, but her age did not detract from her beauty. Her face was rather ordinary, or at least not the beauty of a movie actress. However, I thought she was a beautiful person. She was about 5 feet 4 inches tall in her bare feet. Her body, on the other hand, was something to behold. She never wore clothes that emphasized her feminine assets. Rather, she always wore a jacket with matching trousers or a skirt. If it was a skirt, it was usually ankle-length with a slit that went only to the knee. This was enough to see that she had beautiful calves. Sometimes I saw Emily without a jacket. If she wasn't wearing a loose blouse, it was a loose sweater. She never showed any cleavage, but it was easy to see that she had very nice breasts, probably a D cup at least. Her golden hair was always pulled back into a formal bun, and she wore glasses. Emily recognized me as soon as I walked through the heavy carved glass doors. She smiled and stood up to walk over to me and give me a brief hug. Even though I was in a sullen, gloomy mood, it was impossible not to smile back at her. "God, Ty, I haven't seen you in a long time. Did you come here just to see me?" she asked. "I need to talk to Mr. Thomas." "It's important and personal," I said. "I just need a few minutes of his time." She could read the seriousness of my request on my face. "It has to do with your wife, doesn't it?" Emily asked shrewdly. I liked Emily and didn't want to burden her with my marriage problems. "Maybe," was all I said, putting on her glasses. Emily began looking at her partner's daily schedule of activities. "Mr. Thomas is just finishing up a meeting. He has about 30 minutes before he goes out to meet important clients for lunch. When he gets back to his office, I'll intercept him for you and ask him to spare a minute for you," she said. While I waited for Thomas to return to his office, I sat in the break area. I hadn't been there long before Emily came up to me with a cup of coffee. "I put some Baileys in there," she said. "Looks like you need this." At that moment, Emily's intercom turned on. "I'm back in my office, Emily," I heard Mr. Thomas say. Something happened. Emily took advantage of the opportunity. "Mr. Thomas, I have Tyler Winslow here. He would really like to talk with you for a few minutes." "It's important to him," she said. I heard Mr. Thomas contemplating his time. "If you think it's important, Emily, send him to me. I can give him about 5 minutes, then I have to go." Emily led me through another set of glass doors down a short hallway to a large carved wooden door. The sign read, "William Thomas, Law Counsel." She opened the door, beckoned me to come in, and then closed the door. I found myself in a spacious office. Mr. Thomas stood at a large table at one end of the room. There were several chairs in front of the table. At the other end of the office, there was a sitting area with an armchair, sofa, and coffee table. Mr. Thomas's degrees were displayed on the walls. Mr. Thomas walked around his desk and approached me. He extended his hand to shake mine. "Ty, good to see you. How are you feeling these days? Still in publishing?" "I'm fine," I answered without much enthusiasm. "Well, Ty, Emily thinks it's important that you talk to me. If it's important to Emily, it's important to me. What's on your mind?" Suddenly, I had doubts about what I wanted to talk about with Mr. Thomas, but I started putting out what I thought I wanted to tell him. "I'm sorry I'm talking to you, Mr. Thomas, and now I feel ashamed about it." "What's going on in your life, Ty?" he said, apparently sincerely interested in my problem. "The point is, Mr. Thomas, that my wife, Bree, has informed me that she intends to sleep with one of your associates this Saturday. She is insisting on her date night, and I cannot dissuade her." Mr. Thomas was a very astute lawyer. "And you want me to intervene somehow to stop this? Perhaps talk to Bree or one of the associated partners, right? That was my original goal when I walked into your office, Mr. Thomas, but I've changed my mind. This is my problem, and I must solve it myself without burdening anyone else. I'm sure you're aware that we have a policy against fraternization between employees, especially when they work in the same department and one has power over the other. This could open us up to a possible lawsuit if and when their relationship turns negative. Bree is our top paralegal. She's been here a long time and has been exposed to many overheated lawyers. I hired these lawyers because they had outstanding qualifications in their areas of expertise, and I hired them because they were persistent in achieving my goals. I was like that when I was a trial lawyer, and I am not entirely proud of my behavior towards the women who worked around me. So, Bree had to deal with these guys for years. It's hard to believe that one of them could succeed with her." "Yes, sir," was all I could say. Mr. Thomas put his hand on my shoulder. "The fraternization policy we have now is useless. I could and should have reissued it, making it much more mandatory with concrete consequences for violations. However, I can't do it until Saturday. You know the lawyers, they need to write it, study it, consult with other lawyers, etc., before this is published. Thank you for welcoming me, Mr. Thomas. I'm really sorry I came to you. This is my problem, and I can handle it myself." I turned and left. I returned to the reception area where Emily was waiting for me. "How did everything go?" she asked. "I shouldn't have brought this problem to Mr. Thomas." "I feel stupid," I replied. Then I asked her if I could just relax for a few minutes in the lounge area. "Of course, you can. I'll get you another coffee with extra or something stronger if you want," she said. I sat down in one of the plush chairs to think. I felt like I was out of ideas. I couldn't stop Bree from going on her overnight date with Prince Charming. I put my head in my hands and began to feel sorry for myself. Then I heard Emily say, "It's too early for drinks, let's go to lunch." I thought it would be a really nice time with Emily, it would be great. She used her intercom to call a colleague and tell her to take her place until she returned from her long lunch. Then she took my arm, and we went out to a restaurant that Emily especially loved. We started with iced tea, but before we ordered, Emily said she wanted to know what problem was bothering me. I told her the whole story. Then we ordered. We chatted for a bit while I picked at my Caesar salad, and Emily enjoyed her soup and half a sandwich. After the meal, we ordered coffee. We were both silent until Emily said something unexpected. "Did you know that my late husband was a fighter jet? I knew you were a widow and that your husband died a long time ago, but I didn't know that he was a fighter pilot." "Yes, he was a fighter pilot. I married him a week after he graduated from the Air Force Academy. He spent a year in pilot training before he was assigned to the A-10. He spent 6 months in A-10 training, and we were then sent to our first permanent base, Davis-Monthan Air Force Base near Tucson. I knew that the A-10 was an attack aircraft that the Air Force acquired to support the Army on the ground. Its official name was Thunderbolt II, after the World War II aircraft. Most pilots called it the Warthog because it was an ugly fighter plane, and it was always in the lowlands. Joe was killed 6 years later during a dogfight training mission. An inexperienced wingman accidentally collided with his plane. During those 6 years, Joe was deployed to the Middle East twice. He must have made some meritorious flights because he was awarded the Silver Star, Distinguished Flying Cross, and 2 Bronze Stars. Emily was a little on the verge of tears when she talked about her late husband. "He always been my hero," she said. "Maybe that's why I never got married again." However, she continued, "The point of my story is that Joe often talked about his training, especially in air combat. Some of it was offensive, and some was defensive. Most of it was defensive since the A-10 was slower compared to other fighters. He described one scenario called 1 versus 2 where an enemy fighter was attacking his 2-ship formation from behind. Joe ordered a sharp turn to avoid a possible missile attack. If Joe's element remained in the formation, the enemy fighter treated him as a single target and destroyed both Joe and his wingman in one pass. So, the fighters did what Joe described as defensive separation. At this point, the A-10 on the inside of the turn would drop lower while the other A-10 would rise higher. The attacker now had a choice. If he continued to attack the lower A-10, the upper A-10 would roll to his tail. If an enemy fighter attacked the top A-10, the bottom A-10 would return to the fight and shoot down the attacker. The point is, every choice the enemy made was wrong, and Joe won. Emily's surprise at the fighter tactics struck me, but I didn't understand the meaning. "Are we still talking about Bree's date?" I asked. Emily looked at me and said, "Give her a choice. No matter what choice she makes, you win." At that moment, Emily took my hand, looked into my eyes, and gave me the most attractive smile I had ever seen. After lunch with Emily, I went back to work. I stayed late at work because I didn't want to spend the evening with Bree. I even went to my favorite supper club, the Iris Club, to have a few drinks with friends. When I arrived home, it was 10 p.m., and Bree was waiting for me. "You didn't even call to say you'd be late. I tried so hard to make us a nice dinner. It's in the fridge if you want something to eat. I was also hoping that maybe you would come back to our bed tonight and make love to me," she said. Then she noticed that I was a little drunk. "You are drunk," she stated. "I stayed late because I didn't want to deal with you tonight, and I had a few drinks to help me forget about what you were going to do tomorrow night. Now I'm drunk and going to bed." "You're welcome, Ty," I replied. "Don't worry about tomorrow night. It will be over and in the past before you know it." "We'll be the same," she said. I ignored her and went straight to the guest room, closed the door, stripped down to my underwear, and collapsed on the bed. Surprisingly, the next morning, I woke up early. After coffee and toast, I started doing my weekend chores, cutting the grass, pulling weeds, and so on. When I got back inside, Bree was getting ready to leave. "I'm going to the spa, and then I'm going to get a manicure and pedicure," she announced. "See you in 3 or 4 hours." I just grabbed another cup of coffee and watched her leave without saying a word. Before she walked out the door, I said, "Don't do this, Bree. This won't end well for you." I showered, got dressed, and then went to the grocery store. In the middle of the day, Bree returned. It was obvious that she had dressed up for her date. Her hair was pulled up into an elaborate updo, her fingernails, and even her toenails were painted bright red. However, I was also busy. Bree looked around as she passed the living room and family room and stopped. She called me into the kitchen. "Ty, why is the rug rolled up and the coffee table pushed against the wall?" I looked out of the kitchen and said, "I made room for the dance floor. I also moved the large sofa in the living room to the fireplace." "Why are you doing it?" asked Bree. "I'm doing this for you," I replied. "I'm going to convince you to stay home tonight and spend a romantic evening with me." "Let's go to the kitchen," I said. "Let me show you what's in store for you." As Bree followed me, I pointed out that the dining room table was set for two with our best crockery and crystal. This was complemented by our silver dinnerware. There was a large bouquet of roses in the middle of the table with a candle on either side to create the ambience of the room. The table was set the same as in an expensive restaurant, 2 forks to the left of the plate, a knife and 2 spoons to the right. The dessert spoon was placed horizontally over the top of the plate. A crystal water glass stood at each seat. "I know what you're trying to do, Ty, but it won't work." "You know I have plans for this evening," said Bree. "I know your plans, Bree, but you can always change your plans when something better comes along. Would you rather disappoint me or Prince Charming?" "Please, Ty, don't do this to yourself." "Let me try," I said. "After a short rest, I'll serve dessert, a small cup of vanilla ice cream topped with a shot of green creme de menthe. Then coffee with your choice of liqueur. For the music, I chose my favorite CD, One Stormy Night by Misty Moods. It's soft instrumental music with the sounds of rain and an approaching thunderstorm that slowly approaches from afar until it's directly overhead. It's made for slow, intimate dancing. Of course, we'll have a fire in the fireplace. Ty, I need to get ready to go out. I bought a new dress for this evening, and I don't want to be late, Bree announced. She disappeared upstairs to the bedroom. When I heard the shower turn on, I went upstairs and changed into my black pants, black cotton shirt, and dance shoes. A suit and tie would be too formal for a dinner at home. When Bree reappeared downstairs, she was dressed to kill. It was a classic little black dress with a plunging neckline that showed off her upper chest beautifully. It was short, down to the knees, and the skirt was cut almost to mid-thigh. I could see the top of her stockings on her thighs as she walked. She wore black high heels with 4-inch heels and a diamond-studded strap on top. "What do I look like?" she asked. I was angry but continued to show restraint and an almost cheerful demeanor. "You look great, like you're ready for," I replied. "It would be nice to know, though, that you dress like that for me and not your Prince Charming. It's a special occasion, Ty, and I want to look good." "I'll dress like that for you another time," she said. On Sirius Radio, I heard George Michael start singing Careless Whispers, one of my favorite slow dance songs. I turned up the volume and said, "Can I ask you for one dance before you go?" Bree seemed a little reluctant at first but then said, "Of course." I walked over and took her in my arms. We danced cheek to cheek as we always did when we slow danced. I liked feeling her closeness. "You're wearing my favorite cologne," she said. "English leather," I replied. Towards the end of the song, I started giving her little butterfly kisses on the side of her face. She seemed to love it and purred like a kitten. I can get her back, I thought. I let go of her right hand and moved my hand to the top of her dress. I pulled it off her shoulder, and at the same time, I planted a real kiss on the side of her neck. She froze. "No, Ty, don't do this. You know I'm going to leave. We can do this another time," she said. "It's not too late to change your mind," I said. "I'm not going to do this, Ty. I'm going on a date, and I don't want you to ruin it." "Don't worry, Bree. I won't interfere anymore. I see that you have made your decision, and it's final. However, there are 2 things I want you to do before you walk out the door." Bree looked at me suspiciously. "First, I want you to see what the dining room table looks like with the candles lit and the lights dimmed, and for you to remember how romantic it looks when you walk out the door." I lit the candles and dimmed the lights. "We can have a romantic dinner next week, Ty." I walked up to her and took her left hand in mine. I took her wedding and engagement rings off her finger. "I don't want you touching Prince Charming while wearing the rings I gave you on our engagement day and our wedding day. Bree looked worried as I placed her rings, as well as my wedding ring, on the small table in the hallway. She looked a little embarrassed. All she said was, "Okay." As Bree turned to grab her shawl and clutch, the doorbell rang. We could see the silhouette outside through the carved glass of the door. Who could it be at such a time, she wondered. Since she was closer to the door, she opened it. "Emily? What are you doing here?" she finally asked. I walked around Bree and extended my hand to help Emily cross the threshold into the hallway. Bree now turned her attention to the cocktail dress Emily was wearing. It was something completely different from the conservative secretarial image she was accustomed to at work. It was provocatively red, off the shoulder, and looked like it would fall off her prominent chest if not for the two spaghetti straps across her shoulders. Each strap was tied with a bow. If you pull the bow, the dress will fall to the floor. The dress was not short, it reached about mid-calf but was cut to the top of her red French-style stockings. Her hair was pulled up and decorated with a wide red ribbon. She didn't just look good, she looked great. "Ty invited me when he dimmed the lights in the dining room," Emily said flatly. "He promised me a candlelit dinner, slow dancing to romantic music, cozy cuddles by the fireplace, and a full night of passion and that I could only dream of. What girl could say no to such a proposal?" "You look so different than at work," Bree involuntarily blurted out. "I like to dress up for special occasions," Emily replied. She then added, "And you look beautiful too. It's a very dress. Stanley will have a blast taking it off." "Stanley? Do you know about Stanley?" "Of course, Stanley Wilbur," Emily replied. "Everyone knows him." "Who is everyone?" asked Bree. "Well, everyone in the paralegal department. Most people in the tax department know too, thanks to Stanley." "How could they know?" "We tried to be so careful," Bree asked. "Careful?" "Okay," Emily laughed. "From the moment Stanley was sent here to work with us, he was looking for a way to get into your pants. For one reason or another, he was attracted to you. Your reaction to his clever advances was classic. Almost immediately, you began to dress more short skirts instead of pants, low-cut sweaters instead of blouses, heels instead of flat shoes, and more makeup. He even made you wear his favorite perfume. And then all those secret touches that no one was supposed to see, and dinners together. You were like an open book. Where have I been? I thought. I didn't notice anything." Bree couldn't find a coherent answer. "I didn't realize I was so obvious. It was just supposed to be a little flirting, then I became infatuated with Stanley. Finally, we admitted to each other that we had feelings and that we wanted to be together, as close as only a man and a woman can be. At least once I started to show my irritation." "Well, now you can," I said. I lifted Bree's shawl over her shoulders and opened the door for her. "Don't come back here until mid-morning tomorrow," I added and pushed her toward the front porch. Bree lamented, "I never thought of you. I gave you every chance to decide to stay home with me, but you chose to spend the night with Prince Charming. I hope you enjoy the choice you made. It broke my heart." My last words to Bree before I closed the door were, "Have a good time tonight." "I'm sure I will." Bree stood on the porch for a minute or two before her shadow disappeared into the night. I heard her drive away in the car. I was sad. I couldn't convince Bree to give up the date and stay with me. Things will never be the same again. Emily noticed my sigh and the sadness in my eyes. "I can't imagine how you feel, Ty. But remember what I said, no matter what choice Bree makes, you will win." With these words, she raised her hands to my chest and cued my face. Her breasts pressed against me, and she kissed me with an innocent kiss. I answered it. I put my arm around her waist and pulled her closer. Our kiss turned into a long, wet French kiss as our bodies began to rub against each other. We were both breathing heavily when Emily broke the kiss and said, "Let's have dinner." I told her that dinner wasn't quite ready yet, but she could help me if she wanted. When I walked into the kitchen, I pointed to 3 open bottles of wine, a light white Chardonnay, a rose, and a rich red Cabernet. She chose Chardonnay. After I poured her wine and she tasted it, I put an apron on her and standing behind her, tied it. After a quick kiss, she laughed and asked what I wanted her to do. I baked half a pound of bacon, I said. I need you to cut 5 strips into 1-inch pieces and mix them with the chopped iceberg, and then you can cut the avocado into cubes and add them to it. While Emily was busy doing this and drinking her wine, I started to feel a little depressed. I was standing next to the most beautiful woman in the world, and suddenly I felt like I didn't know enough about to satisfy her. Compared to me, who had only made love to one woman my entire life, she must have been very experienced with a variety of lovers over the years. I walked up behind her and put my hands on her waist. I've never made love to anyone but Bree, I said. It makes me a little worried that I won't be as good as the men you've been with. Before Emily leaned back against me. I'm not worried, Ty. Just do to me what you would do to Bree, and we'll see where it takes us. If I want something different, I'll tell you. Likewise, if you want something from me, I'll do it. Whatever it is. By the way, Emily added, I love foreplay. I kissed the back of her head. Thank you. Have you ever been a cheerleader? You inspire confidence in a man. Thank you, she replied. The salad is ready. She took the bowl of salad to the dining room. I supported her as she sat down and took my place at the head of the table. Before we started dinner, I refilled our wine, and we made a toast. Here's to an unforgettable night together, she said. I can't improve on that idea, I replied. Dinner went smoothly, even though I had to get up as we finished one course and started another. Emily admired the overall meal and said it was a feast anywhere in the world. When I finished my ice cream, I told Emily to relax in the family room while I cleared the table. Once the dining room looked immaculate again, I joined her. Emily listened to the storm approaching and the music from the stereo and swayed to the beat. When I approached her, she got into a dance pose with me, and we enjoyed the soft music together. This is so romantic, Ty. I'm having such a good time, she said. Me too, I replied. You should know that I haven't been with a man in a long time, and I haven't been with many men. However, the men I've been with, I really liked. I really like you, Ty. That's good to know, I said, as we slowly swayed to the music. If at any point tonight, I say I love you, don't be mad at me. I'll mean it. As long as we're together and when we part, I want us to remain best friends. It didn't take long before we stopped dancing and rather just hugged each other. My arms were around her waist, and hers were around my neck, stroking the hair at the back of my neck. We pressed close to each other. I felt her breasts, her thighs, and her legs at the same time. I'm sure she felt me too. I stepped back enough to kiss her neck and throat. Emily leaned her head back inside. I started to get carried away when Emily stopped me from kissing her any further and stepped back. Give me a few minutes to change into something more comfortable, and then we can sit on the couch by the fireplace and get cozy. You can change too if you want. I took a few minutes to undress. I put on my black silk pajama pants and a matching black silk t-shirt. I poured myself a cup of coffee and added some Bailey's Irish cream, then sat down on the sofa to wait for Emily. A few minutes later, I heard her behind me. Before I could move, she wrapped her arms around the back of the couch and under my t-shirt and kissed my neck. I rolled onto my back to see her. She stood behind the sofa wearing a black satin robe that was open in front. A black negligee was visible under the robe, her hair was down, and her legs were bare. I took her hand and pulled her over the back of the sofa. She fell on me. She was so attractive that I couldn't help but kiss her. At first, it was a small, sweet kiss, but her mouth fell open, and we kissed passionately and for a long time in the French style. My hands wandered over her body. I pulled her robe off her shoulder, revealing her negligee barely covering her large, firm breasts. I ran my hand over her smooth skin and pulled on her robe until it slid off her body and fell to the floor. I walked up to her and took her left hand in mine. I took her wedding and engagement rings and took them off her finger. I don't want you touching Prince Charming while wearing the rings I gave you on our engagement day and our wedding day, I said. Bree looked worried as I placed her rings, as well as my wedding ring, on the small table in the hallway. She looked a little embarrassed. For a few seconds, all she said was okay. As Bree turned to grab her shawl and clutch, the doorbell rang. We could see the silhouette outside through the carved glass of the door. Who could it be at such a time? She wondered. Since she was closer to the door, she opened it. I moved down her body, kissing it lower and lower. I stopped at her navel to lick it with my tongue and then continued down to her thighs. Emily began to squirm. I love you, Ty, she said between deep breaths. And I love you too, Emily, I said almost without interruption. I didn't want to part with her, knowing that this was the last time I would have her. Emily must have felt the same way because she cried. I turned her around and hugged her tightly, kissing her lips, face, and neck. Finally, we both sighed. We knew our night and morning of passion were over. I stepped out of the shower first to give Emily time to finish cleaning. When she came out, I had a big fluffy towel ready. I dressed casually, as did Emily, who had brought some clothes with her. Do you want to go to Sunday brunch? I offered. Emily quickly agreed, and I took her to the nearby Cheesecake Factory shopping center. It was 10 a.m., and they were just opening. When I got home around noon, I noticed Bree's car in the garage. I entered the house through a side door and walked through the kitchen into the dining room. I noticed there was a pot of coffee on the stove and poured myself a cup. I saw Bree sitting at the table waiting for me, with a cup in front of her. She looked very strict. Meanwhile, I was very relaxed and had a smile on my face like the cat that ate the canary. I thought I should address the elephant in the room. Well, how was your evening? I asked. Everything was fine, she replied. How was your evening? I felt like I had to be honest. It was the most exciting night of passion I have ever spent with a woman. Emily was extremely affectionate, and we did almost everything we could to please each other. I saw Bree bow her head, and I saw a tear roll down her cheek. I felt terrible. It was the biggest mistake I've ever made in my life. What's happened? I asked. Wasn't Stanley the ardent lover you expected him to be? It wasn't Stanley, Bree snorted. It was me. I couldn't stop thinking about you and Emily and what you did. She was so beautiful and seductive. I knew you'd have a much better time with her than I did with Stanley. He tried to be gentle and wanted to do everything he could to make sure we had a romantic night, but I kept thinking about you and Emily. I started drinking wine at the bar before we even sat down to dinner. During dinner, I just picked at my food. I lost my appetite. However, I continued to drink wine and finished most of the first bottle myself. Stanley tried to stop me from drinking more by taking me into the living room to dance, but by then, I was almost completely drunk and stumbling around. I wasn't very good company for Stanley, and he was starting to get angry, so he suggested we go up to our room. In the room, Stanley attacked me. He wanted to French kiss me, and I didn't like it. Then he started to undress me. I finally decided to let him have with me. I just lay down on the bed. I felt nothing, no excitement, no passion, nothing. He sensed my complete lack of interest in him physically, and when he was done, he said, "That was my worst ever." What is wrong with you? You wanted this as much as I did, and now you're acting like a prude, he said, looking at me with a disappointed expression. Then he got dressed. I can't believe I spent so much time and effort trying to seduce you, and it ended like this. I've wanted to have with you ever since I saw you. Stay here if you want, I'll go to the bar and try to find someone better. As soon as he left, I just cried myself to sleep. When I woke up, the sun was shining, and it was almost mid-morning. I thought that by then, you would be home alone, so I took a shower, got dressed, and left the hotel. When I came home, you weren't here. Emily and I went to brunch, and she went home from there. Since I had such a great time last night, I continued, I'm a little sorry that your evening was such a disappointment, but not that bad. I'm so sorry, Ty, that I ever got involved with Stanley. Now I understand that he just wanted to have with me, he didn't care about me in the slightest. Well, maybe you'll have better luck next time, I complained sarcastically. No, Ty, I will never do this again, never. I want to go back to how it was when we were exclusive. I want to be monogamous again. I want to put this incident behind me and be happy together, just you and me forever. I promised you that if you don't interfere with my date, I will become the best wife in the world. I meant it, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving it. Not so fast, Bree, I said. You've spent the last 6 months in an emotional relationship with Prince Charming, and the last 2 months planning ways the two of you could entertain each other. And now, since it didn't work out for you, you want to go back to the way we were before. It won't happen. I'm not sure I want to be married to you. You hurt me more than I can express. You betrayed our marriage, you humiliated me and wanted to turn me into a cuckold. Then you wanted me to just get over it and accept your wrongdoings as if nothing had happened. That won't work. Next year, I'm going to give myself a gym pass. Once a month, I will allow myself to go on a date night with any woman I choose to be with. If I enter into a relationship, then so be it. At the end of the year, I will reconsider our marriage. If it still doesn't suit me, I will divorce you. If maybe I'm happy with this, then I'll think about becoming exclusive again. You'll have this year to prove to me that you're worth keeping. You can accept these conditions or not. If you don't accept, I'll start divorce proceedings on Monday. Let me know what you decide. I love you, Ty, Bree began, but I took you for granted. Now I know it. It will kill me to know that you are having with some other woman, just like it killed me last night. However, the last thing in the world I want is a divorce. It would kill my soul to lose you. Therefore, I will agree to your terms, and I will keep my promise to be the best wife in the world so that at the end of the year, you will know without a doubt that you want us to stay together. Then it's decided. I didn't know if I would actually be dating other women over the next 12 months or so, but I would do it in a heartbeat if the opportunity presented itself. The rest of the day, I'd be working in the yard and running some errands. If you don't mind washing up last night's dishes and cleaning up the house, I'll take you to TGI Fridays this evening, and we can split an order of ribs. This proposal was my way of trying to normalize the situation. In the future, I didn't want any gorillas between us when the probationary year began. After a few weeks, things went well. Bree was a very attentive wife, and it seemed genuine. Nutrition had improved markedly, especially during dinner. Each dinner included a glass of wine. The meal consisted of a small salad or a cup of soup followed by a small appetizer, such as a 5-ounce steak with potatoes or rice and vegetables. She even added a little dessert after dinner. Bree washed the dishes. I helped by removing excess food and condiments. One night while we were having dinner, Bree very casually said, "I talked to Emily today." I tried not to show surprise and replied, "Oh, what?" Bree replied, "You, me, and her." What did she want to say? Well, the first thing she said was, "Let's go get lunch," and she took me to one of her favorite nearby restaurants. I thought that this was probably the same one where she took me over a glass or two of wine and salad. I asked her point blank if she was going to take you away from me. She laughed and said, "No way, Ty and I were one-night stands, and now we're best friends. We'll never get together like this again." He was bitterly disappointed and hurt by your actions. I think he's still disappointed. Bree said she told Emily, "I'm so ashamed of what I did to Ty and to our marriage. I know I can't fix this. I promise to be a much better wife for him than I was in the past. I intend to keep this promise and hope he responds. I told Emily about your intention to date other women once a month and then reevaluate our marriage at the end of the year. She asked me what I was going to do. I told her, I'll try to come to terms with this, but it will be hard. I'm sure I'll cry a lot while he's out on dates. She asked me if I thought you would actually have with other women. I said that in my opinion, this is possible, maybe not every month, but from time to time. Maybe you can do something about it, Emily suggested. What? I asked her. Give him a choice, but without the option of having someone replace him in case he decides to leave you. Make being home with you so attractive that he turns down the date in favor of a special evening with his wife, she proposed. I told Emily I would do it, so look forward to it if that's your plan, I replied. I could set up a fake date just to see what you come up with. A few weeks later, when I walked into the outside office of Thomas Dixon and Harris, I had a big smile on my face. Of course, Emily guarded the gate for her partners. When she saw me, she stood up from the table and hurried across the room to hug me tightly. Nice to see you again, Ty. I was waiting for you, or rather, Mr. Thomas was waiting for you, she said, still holding me. Do you know what Mr. Thomas wants to see me about? I asked. Of course, I do, she replied. I know everything that happens here. However, Mr. Thomas will tell you himself. Emily walked over to her desk and announced over the intercom that I was here. Mr. Thomas told her to send me inside. Emily led me to the large door to Mr. Thomas's office and let me in. Then she closed it and left. From his desk at the far end of the room, Mr. Thomas stood up and waved to me. Ty, good to see you again. Please have a seat. I called you here for 2 reasons, both relate to you in some way, so I wanted you to know about them. First of all, I wanted you to know that we have rewritten the fraternization policy at our company. It has become much more comprehensive. It should prevent situations similar to those you have gone through in the past because it outlines serious consequences for interpersonal relations between employees and between employees and clients. I have a copy for you to read at your leisure. Let me know what you think of it. I thanked Mr. Thomas for thinking about me and the problem I had told him about earlier. Without getting too personal, Ty, Mr. Thomas continued, how are things at home? I sincerely hope you and Bree are doing well. He continued, I visited Bree's section a few days ago and spoke to her. I did not discuss your family situation but rather discussed the ongoing work being done by her section and asked if there were any problems that I could help address. According to my observations, she looked happy and content. I didn't want to go into detail about the current state of affairs between me and Bree, so I simply said things are getting better, and I expect we'll be fine in the long run, I replied. Mr. Thomas replied, I'm glad to hear that. The other reason I wanted to talk to you is that I wanted you to hear a letter I sent to Hughes Duvet and Lewis, the law firm where Stanley Wilbur works. Regardless of his interpersonal relationship with Bree, he did a great job working to help us with a tax matter that we did not have the expertise to handle at the time. Having said this, Thomas put on his glasses, took the handwritten letter, and began to read. Dear Steve, you have an official report on the performance of Stanley Wilbur regarding the assistance he gave us during his tenure with Thomas Dixon and Harris. He was instrumental in helping my attorneys resolve many of the issues surrounding this case while at the same time teaching our attorneys how to handle similar cases in the future. However, this private and formal letter is intended to describe another side of Stanley Wilbur's performance that was less than acceptable. He began a personal relationship with one of our married employees. This prolonged seduction led to contact with this married woman before his departure. The husband of our employee was well aware of this meeting. This affected his relationship with his wife and destroyed their marriage to the point where its viability is uncertain. In general, public opinion of lawyers is not so good. Most believe that lawyers want to win at the expense of justice or make money at the expense of their clients. All we really have is our integrity. Stanley Wilbur's honesty in his personal life is questionable. Moreover, I believe that his lack of honesty in his personal relationships can easily be attributed to his professional ethics. For this reason, I would caution you to be careful with the legal functions that Stanley Wilbur performed on behalf of your law firm. Again, this is an informal letter between you and me only. Take whatever action you deem necessary against this lawyer or take no action at all. I leave this up to you. Your friend, William. Mr. Thomas put the letter aside and said, this letter does not do full justice to what Stanley did to you and Bree, but it will not help him advance in his firm, at least not as quickly as he might expect. This is what I can do for you, Ty. I hope you're somewhat satisfied that Stanley didn't get away with what he did without consequences. I thanked Mr. Thomas for what he had done on my behalf and left his office. I was deep in thought when I realized Emily was standing next to me, trying to scrutinize my expression. Fine, she said. I'm quite happy with how it all worked out and how it's shaping up. I owe you a lot for being my friend through all of this. Thank you, I continued. Don't forget, Ty, she said, hugging me and holding me close. I learned a lot from this too. I really loved you while we were together. And I loved you too, I replied. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one. How do you like the story? I think the story is exciting with an interesting plot twist. In this story, I was on my husband's side and completely justify his actions. What is your opinion? Write in the comments. Until next